Ancient Greece is often remembered as the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and art. But behind the marble statues and heroic myths lies a far more complicated and uncomfortable reality. A world where desire, power, and morality followed rules very different from our own. What the Greeks considered normal would shock the modern mind, and what they celebrated publicly often hid darker truths in private. When we talk about the sexual freedom of ancient Greece, we must understand one thing clearly. This freedom was not equal, not innocent, and not romantic in the way it is sometimes portrayed today. It was shaped by hierarchy, status, and control. In ancient Greek society, sexuality was not defined by gender the way it is now. Instead, it was defined by power. The most important distinction was not male or female, but dominant and submissive. Adult freeborn men sat at the top of this hierarchy. Everyone else existed below them. For elite men, desire was seen as a natural force that needed expression. Marriage was not about love. It was about producing legitimate heirs. Emotional connection, passion, and pleasure were often sought outside marriage. Wives were expected to be modest, silent, and largely confined to the home. Public life, intellectual conversation, and pleasure were considered inappropriate for them. This created a double world, one public, honorable, and respectable, the other hidden, indulgent, and deeply unequal. One of the most misunderstood aspects of ancient Greek sexuality is the practice often discussed in historical texts involving relationships between older men and younger males. In Greek culture, these relationships were framed as mentorships, where an older man was expected to educate a younger one in politics, warfare, and social conduct. However, beneath this idealized explanation lay a reality shaped by imbalance. The younger participants had limited power in these arrangements. Social pressure played a major role, and refusal could result in loss of status or protection. While Greek writers praise restraint and discipline, the system itself blurred moral boundaries. It normalized desire through tradition, even when consent was complicated by age, authority, and expectation. Importantly, not all Greeks agreed with this practice. Philosophers like Plato later questioned its ethics, warning that unchecked desire could corrupt both the mind and the state. These debates show that ancient Greece was not morally unified. It was a society constantly arguing with itself. Another hidden side of Greek sexual life was the role of prostitution. Unlike many other ancient cultures, prostitution in Greece was legal and openly practiced. But again, equality was an illusion. There were different classes of sex workers. At the lowest level were enslaved individuals, forced into brothels with no control over their bodies. At the highest level were the hetaerae. These women were educated, skilled in conversation, music, and philosophy. They could attend banquets, debate with men, and influence powerful figures. Yet even the most respected hetaerae lived under constant vulnerability. Their independence came at the cost of social legitimacy. They could never be wives. They could never be fully accepted. Their value was tied to youth, beauty, and favor. Once that faded, so did their protection. Sex in ancient Greece was also deeply connected to religion. Fertility rituals, sacred festivals, and mythological stories often carried sexual symbolism. Gods were portrayed as passionate, jealous, and uncontrollable. Zeus himself was known for endless affairs, often using deception or force. These myths did more than entertain. They shaped cultural norms. When gods behaved without consequence, human behavior found justification. Desire became divine, and restraint became optional for those in power. Public festivals like the Dionysian celebrations temporarily dissolved social boundaries. Drinking, dancing, and sexual expression were seen as a release from order. But once the festival ended, control returned. The freedom was temporary, carefully contained, and mostly safe for elite men. What is often ignored is how little agency women and enslaved people had in this system. Consent, as we understand it today, was not central to Greek sexual ethics. Honor mattered more than harm. Reputation mattered more than well-being. If a man's status remained intact, his actions were rarely questioned. Female desire, when expressed, was considered dangerous. Women who stepped outside expected behavior were labeled immoral or unstable. Famous figures like Sappho were exceptions, not the rule, and even they were later misunderstood, censored, or reshaped by history. Ancient Greek philosophy frequently discussed self-control, yet society allowed desire to flow downward through hierarchy. Discipline was expected from the weak, not the powerful. This contradiction sits at the heart of Greek sexual culture. When modern media romanticizes ancient Greece as sexually enlightened, it often ignores these realities. Freedom existed, but it was selective. Pleasure was accessible, but not shared equally. Beauty was worshipped, but only when it served power. Understanding these darker truths does not mean rejecting Greek civilization. It means seeing it clearly. The same society that gave us ethics, logic, and democracy also normalized exploitation, silence, and inequality. History is not meant to comfort us. It is meant to challenge us. Ancient Greece forces us to ask difficult questions about morality, power, and how societies justify desire. If you look closely, the past is not as distant as it seems. The language may change, the customs may evolve, but the struggle between power and consent, freedom and control, still exists today. If this deep dive into the hidden psychology and uncomfortable truths of ancient civilizations made you think, then this channel is for you. Like the video, subscribe for more dark history and human psychology, and comment below what part of ancient society you want exposed next.